speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the night, Bill.
Thank you very much. Hi, Bill. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bill.
So there's 50 allowed in the room, right? So if I would have been just a little later, then I would have been able to stay outside. And Mike Bennett, who called and asked me to speak here tonight, quickly headed for Alabama he says he's going to watch it. We'll see about that. In my AA experience, the answer to any question is always yes, if you're asked to speak or asked to be somebody's sponsor or something. So, though I have not been to this meeting in a long time, of course I said yes. I think that's a good tradition. I think part of what AA has done is to show me that I'm not always in control, and by not deciding whether or not I'm going to speak here or do this or do that, but I'm going to just say yes, means that I'm not deciding. It's decided elsewhere, which I think is good. I needed to not always be in control of everything. I've been sober 38 years. I'll tell you, it's not very hard to do. You just have to just keep getting older and older, and it comes right all along, you know. I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about whether I had a drinking problem. I was a big beer drinker. I drank beer like pretty much any time I could get my hands on one. I didn't drink at work. I tried not to drink when I was driving. I never got pulled over. I lived in Chicago, so I didn't drive a lot, you know, because you're taking taxis and stuff. So, but it didn't dawn on me that I might have a problem and that I might need AA to solve it until a Sunday. That was the Sunday before the Tuesday where I went to my first meeting. It happened very fast. I was out of town on a family vacation, a road trip type vacation to Delaware, where a brother lived. And there was a beer wagon, free beer. Nothing better than it says it right there. That's my favorite sign. But it needs to say right now, not tomorrow. So it's hotter than blazes, and I finally get up to the beer wagon with my cup, and I'm getting mostly just foam. So I figure I deserved a whole glass. So I fill it up, and I drink a little bit, and I fill it up, and I drink a little bit. And one of these times I'm looking, there's this big line of people waiting for their turn, and I realized how that looked. And, you know, I wasn't going to explain to them that, but that bothered me. You know, the little yellow light started to flash maybe in the corner of my eye. Then the family stayed on and came home on the train a week later, and I had to get back to work. So I drove back. And of course, I had a couple of beers at a truck stop where I was then going to sleep for a few hours. It would help me sleep, of course. And when I got back, I got really loaded because I was by myself in the house. Now, I have 5 children, lived in an apartment, crowded. I was on my second wife at that time. And you don't have a whole lot of quiet time. A friend here is having a baby in a few months. Well, I discovered the best time to really get loaded is when the baby's been born and you've come home from the hospital and grandma's on the bus and she'll be here tomorrow and the kids are all across the street and nobody knows that you've come home and you don't have to go back to work. So, yippee, you know. Well, that's the first time I heard somebody tell that story and I realized, yeah, that I did that too several times. But, you know, so I had one of those golden moments, and then it was dinner time, and I'm walking outside to go to dinner, and I am stumbling because I'm drunk. And I said to myself, if people didn't know who I am, they would think I'm a drunk like my Uncle Orville, who did that, who was definitely at the town drunk in Red Bud, Illinois. And then I thought, they don't know who I am, and I am a drunk like my Uncle Orville, you know. Oops, then another light starts flashing. When I got home, I had somehow started thinking about this, and I realized that at work, now I had worked in advertising for 15 years at that point, and I was the creative director of a middle-sized agency, which meant that that the other departments were mad at me all the time for what my department wasn't doing right, and they wanted me to fire this art director who was really good. And I had gone through a firing before, and filling the hole was like 6 months. It was like, then everybody's working twice as hard. So I wanted to resist it as much as possible. And why they wanted me to fire this guy was because at noon, occasionally, not very often, he would go out and get really hammered and get back around 3 o'clock, and he would be loud and all that sort of thing. And it didn't matter what work he was turning in. He offended some of the upper people. And as I'm sitting there at my dining room table, I realized he and I are the same. I just wait a few hours. I wait till I get home. I don't get drunk while I'm still there. And I was really busy at that job. I was running around like crazy, and I had to sign about every layout that came through, and I had to look at this and look at that and hold meetings. And I actually, my day drinking anyway, went down because I couldn't afford to be drunk at work. I just had too much to do. But I waited till I got home, and then I thought, you know, my grandparents got sober in AA in the 40s. And I knew that it was the real thing. They stayed sober. I remember my grandmother talking to her brother saying, Bart, you know, you have to go to meetings, you know, and she was, you know, that's it. I didn't get any big stories or anything, and I knew nothing about the program except that they had gotten sober. And I had never seen them drunk, so I didn't really know how significant that was. I know that my Uncle Orville never did get it sober. But I thought, if I can get this guy to go to AA and then tell them that we're going to AA, and I'd go too, then maybe they get off my back and I wouldn't have to fire him. So Monday, he always got in early, and as an alcoholic, I also was always at work early. I was, maybe that was a way upstairs in my mind of somehow proving to myself that I really wasn't falling behind or anything like that. I was always good at the job, and as a father, I thought. But I approached him and I said, he was there at 7 o'clock, we didn't start till 9, and he said, I said, I think you and I have the same issue, you know they want me to fire you, and I don't think that's fair. But what if we went to an AA meeting? There's a place about 3 blocks from here that has a meeting at 7:30. He said, sure. Wow, so we met that Tuesday morning at the office at 7, walked over to the Mustard Seed in Chicago at that time, and you know, that changed my life forever. I walked in the door of this filthy place. It was I don't know if you know what a 3-flight is. It's like 1, 2, 3 above each other, narrow, 25 feet wide or so. And the ground floor of that building was the Mustard Seed. And the tile, I remember, was all different colors on the floor because they had filled in broken tiles, I guess. The bathroom, there was, of course, only one because it had been an apartment. And not one woman ever used it more than once because it was really bad. And there was in the back where the kitchen was, they had a couple of big coffee urns, and it had meetings pretty much round the clock. I think the last meeting of the day was at midnight. So we're there at 7:30, and we sit down, and they ask us, is this anybody? And I'm looking around, I see this stuff, you know. Well, I didn't know there was 12 steps. I kind of thought maybe it was like a Masonic hall with the levels of the whatever. I didn't have any idea. This woman starts to speak and asks, like he was doing, is anybody's first ever meeting? And I raised my hand. I think he did too. And what happened, I didn't realize this. The Mustard Seed always did this. If it was somebody's first meeting without saying a word and making them uncomfortable, they would automatically shift the lead to somebody telling their story. Now, and nobody tells their story for an hour. They would tell it for 10 minutes, and then there would be comments. So I heard, I don't know how many, 25 different people telling about their first encounter with the program one way or another, or the problems they had before or something. And I connected with what they said. It was exactly, even though that was a very diverse group. There were cops. There was a cop in a white shirt. He's a lieutenant or higher. There was one of them there. There was a guy who was a doorman. There was a guy who had a wet brain who always came. He spoke in gibber. Nobody could understand a word he said. He would stand up and speak for about 40 seconds and then sit back down. He was done. God only knows what he said, but he stayed sober apparently. There was every kind of person you could imagine, suits and so on, and I expected everybody would be wearing hospital gowns. I had no idea. They were all on their way to work. They worked at the North Michigan Avenue retail shops and the ad agencies and the law firms and stuff like that. These were people that were somehow, they went to this 7:30 meeting every morning, pretty much. It turns out, I didn't know that they had meetings so often. I thought I could work a monthly meeting into my busy schedule. And I really liked what I heard, and I realized that when it came around like this for making comments, and I saw that it was going to come to me, and I listened to what people were saying, and they said their first name and that they were an alcoholic. And I said that like I was supposed to, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic because I had a job. I didn't know anything, nothing. And my grandparents I guess they were alcoholics. Of course they were, now I know. But I went into the back where the coffee guy sat at a table back there, and I said, this isn't bad. I kind of like this AA. Let me have a set of the membership forms. I want to fill them out. I think I'm going to join. And he said, I don't think you're going to have to do that. So I went back out and sat down. The meeting is over. Several people come up to me and ask me about, can you come back tomorrow? And I thought, tomorrow? Really? Well, what else? It was a perfect time slot. For me, getting to meetings has always been a matter of time slots. So, I guess I could come back tomorrow. Great. So I did. And the next day and the next day. The other guy who 12-stepped me in by being a drunk at work, he never went to another meeting as far as I know. He then left the company. And 2 months later, I did get fired. Turned out to be the best thing that ever happened. Because you never know. I don't always know what's best for myself. At that time, I still did. It would take a few, I guess you'd call them rounds, to realize that somehow somebody was keeping an eye out for me. And if it was for anything, it was because of the 5 kids. I ended up freelancing. I didn't ever get another agency job for like 20 years. And as a freelancer, I couldn't even tell anybody that I was going to AA meetings. They would have assumed that big project they were counting on me to deliver would somehow end up, in the river or something, and I would be found under a bridge because I went out, So I never ever told any client that ever. I also realized that if I had been drinking and fired, I would never have been able to freelance. So there definitely was somebody who had to set things up first, and then I was going to get fired, then I would get offered a project, then I would decide that maybe I could do more of this, and so on. It wasn't up to me. And I found, to my surprise, that there was kind of an AA hidden all over the place. I mostly lived near downtown and worked downtown. There were noon meetings. They were so fun to find. There would be a meeting in the Sears Tower. There would be a meeting in City Hall. There'd be, when you'd see people that you recognize at some of these meetings, and at lunchtime, and people are all bringing their McDonald's or their bag lunch or whatever it was and leaving when they had to. And I just heard the most amazing stories of people, of the things, it was basically this, and I had just as many as the next guy. The stupid things I had done that I didn't think were stupid, that I thought were completely normal. And how I looked to the outside world, it must have just been a riot. They must have thought, what's this guy in a clown suit doing here? Because he's over the top. I had really not started drinking until, I guess I was in my 20s. I was broke in college, and I remember one time we went to a drive-in and sneaked in, and some of us were in the trunk of this guy's car. Well, it was like zero. And the car didn't have the floor was rusted out, so we were all inhaling exhaust, which made us feel really good. And then we were sitting in the car with the convertible. He couldn't put the windows up because they wouldn't. I don't know, so you're just freezing your ass off drinking a beer. Now, that's That's what you want to do when you're freezing cold, is have a nice cold beer, you know. And it never got any better than that, honestly. I would be shoveling snow, and I would have a beer on the fence, and when I went back to get it, it would be slushy because it had started freezing. We had block parties occasionally, or we would have a street fair that was on our street, and I would always be in charge of the beer because I knew how to sell beer. And I once rented a little horse tank, one of those corrugated metal tanks, and got some block ice, because you've got to have the beer floating in the ice and we had an ice pick, and every once in a while somebody would puncture a can. That was my can. They always handed those to me. Here, this one's yours. We popped another one. You know, I don't know how I got up the stairs that night. But none of this struck me as unusual, because I thought that I was just a guy having fun. I thought everybody had fun. Beer's the breakfast of champions. You know, it's like, it isn't at all dangerous or anything. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't think I was an alcoholic. And I could have, you know, some people have consumed more beer than I did, but I had to point out that there is no longer really a Schlitz anymore, and that's probably because of me. But I just had hundreds of those little things. I remember one time they ran out of beer at a party. It was just across the street from where we lived. And so I said, I'll go get some more. So I walk 3 blocks, and I want to make sure there's enough. You know, that's another thing that alcoholics are always thinking about that. So I bought 2 cases. Now I have to carry them. You know, they're heavy. And I struggle back. I'm carrying them like this. I'm carrying them like this. I'm carrying them like this. And I finally get back there, and the party's over. So, okay. I don't think twice about it. I just take them home, you know. Can't ever have too much. I had heard there was going to be a strike of the guys that drove the beer trucks one time. And stock up. You better stock up. So we had a grocery store really close, and I had one of those carts, those 4-wheel carts, and I filled that sucker up with beer. It weighed at least 9 or 10 tons. And I couldn't go down the curbs. I couldn't come back up if I did. So I'm walking down the street, and then I'm going down the alley, and one of my neighbors says, are you having a party? And I said, no, just stocking up. You know, everybody buys 8 cases of beer and brings them home in his grocery cart in the middle of the street. I don't know, see? It really never stops. And I started seeing those things in other people's comments. If anything cemented the belief, and you know, I know some of you have had a lot of people pushing you to get into the program or to sober up, or you're not sure if you really have a problem. I didn't think I had a problem until that Sunday, and then I realized also I had tried, and this was in August, I had tried quitting for Lent that year. And I didn't make it. And I didn't, you know, it wasn't like I was hanging on for dear life. It was just that all of a sudden on Palm Sunday, I'm sitting in the kitchen and I'm having a beer. Now, that almost happened another time when I was on the phone and there was a glass of wine sitting on the counter, and I just about picked it up and drank it, because that's what you do with them. You know, that's just the natural flow of it's like motor memory, I guess you'd say. So I knew there was no chance. I couldn't quit smoking. I couldn't quit anything. So how could I quit drinking? So there's only one thing to do, was go to AA. So once there, I didn't ever want to go back. I got to a month without even thinking about it. I was so impressed with the society, the social nature of those people. I still like a more diverse group. I drive to Phoenix a couple days a week to go to a meeting in Fellowship Hall in Glendale that's just kind of like the good old days for me. You know, you like what you like. And I realized that when I walked in the door, I had pretty much completed the first 3 steps. I realized that I was powerless over alcohol, no question about it. My life was completely unmanageable. My wife was also threatening to leave as soon as the baby, who was 2, got a little older. Let's not waste any money on counseling, she said. So, you know, the things I really felt were really important. I was on the verge of losing. A power greater than ourselves. Well, the meeting, I didn't think of that in the sense of a God. I thought about the fact that AA seemed to be able to get people sober. It had gotten my grandparents sober. And all the people in the room were happily sober. It flabbergasted me. They were all laughing. They knew each other really well because, of course, they went there every day. Nobody was clinging by their fingernails to anything. Their stories were funnier than mine. I was so entertained, I couldn't resist not going. I had to keep going, put it that way. And number 3, turn our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Well, when they read that, first time I ever heard it was at the meeting, I realized that word was the underlined words or the italic words. I could tell that was a really important addition to that sentence, because whatever the God thing was going to be, I heard there was something. I was going to go along with it, whatever they said. And so that was sort of step 3. But they let me off the hook with this as we understood him. There's no requirements. There's no theology. And I accepted in my mind that the program and the wisdom in the room was always greater than myself. And that got me along a long ways, like it's gotten me along like 30 years, 38 years. I still am not real religious. I'm respectful now. I didn't used to be. But then there's step 4. Okay, well that's a homework step. I just went to those meetings every day, and I referred to them as handlers. They were keeping an eye on me, making sure that I was there. Mainly, they were finding out about me, finding out about my home life and my job problems, then lost the job and so on. And about 3 months in, one of them, a woman my mother's age, and the people that meant the most to me were 2 people my parents' age, a man and a woman. They both happened to be Jewish, which is a little bit of a different belief cycle than having grown up Catholic. Not the same things are wrong, or they don't have any concept of sin that's comparable. So naturally, of course, I went right for that. And she, who's now passed away, was both of them, said, maybe you ought to get a sponsor. And I said, well, who? I don't know. She said, well, how about Dick? Because you and he are both in the same business. Yeah, okay. So I did. So Dick guides me through my 4th step. Now, I said, so how do you want me to do it? I had never seen anybody doing it with columns. I know they do that sometimes now. The 12 and 12 says that you should write it out more narratively, and it talks about the 7 deadly sins or whatever it is. And he said, why don't you go down to the central office? They have a lot of workbooks and things. And Hazelden was near Chicago anyway, and they don't talk about it so much here, but Hazelden is a pretty important, I guess you'd call it a treatment center. That one in Betty Ford didn't even exist yet. But I went down, I got everything they had. I mean, everything. I filled everything out. Some of it you had to write on a separate sheet. So I had workbooks and yellow pages and typed stuff and everything. It was a mess. And I was all done at my 1st year anniversary. I set myself the deadline. He never pushed me. And I said, do you want me to retype everything and kind of clean it up? And he said, no, I don't think you're going to need to do that. So he said, let me read it. We'll have lunch next week. I was expecting candles in the dark and all that kind of stuff, because I'd heard of 5th steps being that way. So we're sitting in the Corona Cafe, no longer there. They should save those places that are important to us. At least put up a plaque. And they did, when they tore the mustard seed down, people went and climbed the fence and got bricks. There's a whole lot of people who have a brick in their house. I wish I would have done that. But he slid the envelope back across the table to me and started telling me about himself. Now, I didn't know. I thought I was going to get a lecture like a priest would do in confession, or that I was kind of doing. No, he said, all the stuff that you have written down here, the details of your tawdry little love life and all these stupid things, that's all they are. They're just normal things that everybody does. They are not your problem. Your problem is you're a perfectionist, and you drive everybody crazy. And the people that live with you, your neighbors, and especially the people that you work with, you're always on them to do more or faster or something, and you got to. That's causing you more trouble than anything. Well, he was absolutely right. None of that other stuff was even important. Most of it just kind of eventually fell away because it didn't make any sense. But the perfectionism problem is still a problem to this day. I want everything to be, I want the ducks all lined up straight and all that sort of thing. And if yours aren't straight, I'm going to probably remind you. Or I won't. Maybe I'll actually overcome it. Then 6 and 7, well, of course I don't want to have these around. I mean, some people love their defects. I didn't love losing my temper in a meeting and then being an idiot. That didn't make me feel good. None of those things really did. I was happy to be rid of them, and the perfectionism thing was nothing to cling to either. So then you get to 8, the list of persons. All right, I didn't have very many. I had a little book on my desk or a little notebook that I would, if I thought of somebody, I think I had like 5 people outside of immediate family. I mean, those were obvious. I had a boss that had gone out of his way to intercede for me when I wanted to change to a different group that I was in. That never happened at the company that we were at, and I wasn't very nice to him. I wasn't very grateful for the fact that he did that, and so I apologized to him for being a jerk more than anything. Some people go into a big thing about how they were drinking when that never came up. I had a neighbor who I lived in a 6 flat, which is 6 apartments, and he was going to buy storm windows for the whole building, and then we would divide up and so on. And I thought he was, of course I was drunk, I thought that perhaps he was making a little money on the side himself out of it, and accused him at a meeting of being a crook, and he was stealing from us and all kinds of nasty things. He was on my list. And I saw him at a kid's soccer game one Saturday morning, and I just went up to him and I apologized once again for being a jerk. Maybe I was a little drunk that day, but that's no excuse. And they all went like that. Many years later, that boss, I looked him up on the internet because I figured he was probably dead by now. He wasn't. He was in his 90s. And I went out and we had lunch a couple times. That's about as nice of a reunion, amend, everything, I mean, because it all comes together nicely if you aren't trying to force it. It seems to me. I don't know. Then I realized 10, 11, and 12, and I made 10, 11, and 12, this, when you're wrong, promptly admitting it, what a concept. It never occurred to me that when you had really stepped in it, that you could somehow get out of it by apologizing. Like, I didn't mean to yell at everybody at the meeting because they were stupid. Maybe it's me. And I would do that. I had a pretty fair opinion of myself. Not that I don't still. But one of my kids, we were yelling at each other on the phone one time and slammed the phone down kind of thing. And I thought, I should probably call her up and make an amend. And then I'm thinking this through, and the phone rings, and she apologizes to me for losing her temper. Now, she's not an alcoholic, so she doesn't need this step. It's automatic for her, for regular human beings, for civilians. They always know that if you're wrong, you can promptly admit it, and bygones will be bygones. And praying for knowledge of his will and the power to carry it out, instead of having to pray for every little thing, thinking again that this is what I need, this will be a good thing for me, I can't be sure. I've been wrong enough times to know. So that kind of means that it's a very blanket kind of thing. I'm really acknowledging that there is a God. He's running it. He knows. And I just need to know how to follow his idea. And the spiritual awakening for me was the fact that I did all this stuff. I never had the burning bush, which they go to great pains to explain in the back of the big book that this is not the normal thing the way Bill described it. Bill's a little out there. We all know that. And if you ever saw the movie, somebody tell me the name of it, James Woods and James Garner. Woods is Bill W. and Garner is Dr. Bob. Woods is just like off the ceiling with ideas. And Garner, we know what he's like. He's in bed. He's very sick during the whole movie, is saying, now, Billy, well, if it hadn't been for those two guys, I don't think we'd be standing here, because I think it would have burned out in some crazy thing that was Bill's way. But certainly it needed Bill to be there too. So I don't know. I just think it's the most amazing thing. I moved to Prescott 3 years ago, and before I moved here, I was of course looking at the town and looking at houses and stuff like that, and going to meetings. Because that's always been really the biggest part of my life. It's the most entertaining. I don't really have a lot of friends that aren't in the program. If I ever go back to Chicago and visit people, I'm always going to AA meetings and seeing all my old AA friends. They're my friends. There's a Saturday morning bunch that I don't know how many decades I've seen those people every week. And one of them is my sponsor. And it's just, I don't know, I have had to come to learn more about myself. I believe truly that I have a different wiring diagram than the average person. I just look at the world differently. It's selfishly sometimes. Other times it's certainly always excessively. What did somebody say? Well, this is a disease of more. I always want more of anything I like. Doesn't matter. I can bake a couple of pumpkin pies and eat one of them, all of it, before they cool off. And a whole container of Cool Whip. The big one, though, you have to have you don't want to run out, That never goes away. So I have to learn how to manage it. If I feel like I need to get to the airport an hour early to make sure I don't miss my plane, I just do. It's like I don't have. But if nobody else, if they insist on not going, then I have to just kind of swallow it, not force myself into a place of having to do a 10th step with them. Just be nice. Try not to make them live my world. But that, this doesn't happen very often. I once went to one of those big amusement parks that has like a dozen roller coasters with a sponsee. Of course, it would only be another alcoholic. And we spent the whole day riding each roller coaster from the front seat. Now, okay, see, it was the best. And it was the Eagle, by the way, that's the number one. But no civilian would ever do that. We had to wait like for 4 roller coasters to go by to get the front seat, because there are other people doing this too. Probably in the program, who knows? Or needing to be. But see, that day, we had extra fun. And that's kind of what I always want, is extra fun. The joke about all you can drink for $5 and the alcoholic says, give me $10 worth. That's me. If you tell that joke to one of my brothers, then most of them, one of them might be an alcoholic, but none of my business. But if you tell them that joke, they don't think it's funny. They just think, oh yeah, that's pretty stupid. Well, yeah, but we feel it a different way. I swear. If I hadn't stumbled into the program that day, that quick 3 days, that one day realizing, like struck by lightning, I need to do this. I don't think I could have been told that you have a drinking problem. Well, what do you know? And people told me who knew how much I drank that I didn't have a drinking problem, because they were thinking, a gallon a day or something of whiskey or vodka. I never liked to get that drunk. But I didn't like to be that sober either. If I could just keep that floating, and beer was good for that, because beer was easier to titrate the dosage. The problem with drinking is that you get drunk like 15 minutes later. So you don't really know if you've had too much or not enough until it's too late. And I one time woke up from a drinking dream completely drunk, and I sat up in bed, and it just immediately left because I woke up, right? And I immediately thought, if only it could have been like that, if I could have just turned it off, But no, I couldn't, because I'd be out thrown up in the bathroom of some dirty bar, wondering how I'm going to get home and where are we going to go next, and or 3 couples went to a place that had a 2-drink minimum. So we're sitting at this little table, and there's suddenly 6 glasses of beer on the table, and they're sipping, those dummies. And I drink one fast, and I'm on my second one, and somebody says, this band is no good, let's go. So they all get up to leave. There's like 4 glasses of beer here. Wait a minute. This is good beer. We don't want to waste good beer. And I drank them all, one after another, of course. Right. Nobody thinks that's strange in this room. Nobody wants to waste good beer. I don't know. Since I got sober, they invented craft beer. Now, what I thought that was a line of beer that was being produced by Kraft Foods. How would I know? And I don't, I never used that word. I never wrote that word in terms of like craftsmanship. It would be made, not crafted. That sounded a little pompous to me. And if that's what it meant, and the beers themselves, the way they were trying to turn themselves into wine, to where, this goes with this kind of meat, and this goes, I thought, that's a bunch of bullshit. You just need a whole bunch of cold beer in the refrigerator, and it doesn't really matter what kind it is, although old style is the best, which they probably don't sell around here, and just drink one after another. It's just that simple. It goes with everything, absolutely everything. I worked briefly at Starbucks. Of course, an alcoholic can't work at Starbucks because they're idiots. And they were teaching us what kind of coffee went with what kind of pastries. And of course, what do? I say, coffee goes with donuts, any donuts, like there is nothing sophisticated here. Well, they didn't appreciate that. They were trying to create that, that vintage thing with their coffee. I also was way too slow. I couldn't make coffee. I couldn't make 15 different drinks at the same time. I'm a linear person. I bet there are other linear people here too. But I can't change. I can't become one of them. Then I realized that the 19-year-olds, they weren't paying attention to the recipe. They'd pump a little chocolate in for a mocha, like they were just, and nobody ever got mad at them, but I was trying to do it exactly right. It's not possible. So anyhow, glad you're at this meeting. You've been a good audience. Don't forget to tip your waitress. It's nice to be here. That's all I can say. And face-to-face meetings beat the hell out of Zoom, I'll tell you. I stopped Zoom. So anyway, hasta la vista.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. So let's thank Bill once more.